So Frederick Fenter is from Frontiers, and he'll present on Frontiers' ambition for open science. Fred is executive editor for Frontiers. His 20-year career in publishing has been varied, involved libraries, document repositories, databases, and open access publishing initiatives. So, please.
Okay, thank you, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here to tell you a little bit about the Frontiers' take on the open access world. What I'm going to do is tell a little story, I think. I'm going to step back 10 years, and I'm going to try to give you a little bit of perspective about why we do things the way we do it at Frontiers. I'll just go to the first slide. So this is a landing page of a typical journal, Frontiers in Immunology. Now, Kathleen's presentation this morning was one that probably could serve as an introduction to almost any of the presentations today. This frustration with the subscription-based publishers goes back at least 10 years, 15 years, when the internet became available as a very powerful communication channel. Everybody immediately understood that something had to change. The two founders of Frontiers, they contacted me in about 2006, and I was sort of the local publishing expert in Lausanne, and they said, look, we want to change the world. We have a very big problem here. Roughly, back in those days, about 1.5 million to 2 million articles a year, depending upon how you count. These millions of articles deserve to be and need to be published differently. This is a very big problem. We're going to solve this problem, and Kathleen also used the word this morning, scalable. The solution has to be scalable if we're really going to be able to solve this big problem. You know, what is great is there's room for all kinds of experimentation, there's room for new ideas, and this type of conference, that's really the beauty of this type of conference, is we pull people together, we bang our heads together to see the best way to move forward. But I think that this word scalability has to remain at the center of the discussion. Now, why, so the platform, Frontiers, we made the decision in 2006 to build our own platform. Now, that was already a very controversial decision. Controversial, I don't know, let's say it was a risky decision, because most of what you had to do in a publication platform was available as off-the-shelf solutions. And I remember talking to the team that was launching Frontiers saying, look, why invest literally hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars building a platform if you could solve most of what you're trying to do with off-the-shelf solutions? And the answer is, because we cannot program into the processes the things that we feel need to happen in order to solve this very big problem. So what they needed to do was code in the principles for open science. It was very important back in those days. Now, Frontiers was founded 10 years ago. Frontiers, when we launched at the Society for Neuroscience meeting in October 2007, I remember people coming up to us saying, the fact that we publish the names of the reviewers, that we have a collaborative peer review process, these were all absolutely revolutionary, and there were huge steps towards everything that we're talking about today in terms of having open processes. And so it was important to be transparent. Things had to be transparent, things had to be accountable, there had to be accountability, and there had to be collaborative processes. One of the core reasons, core motivation, and that's what I'm going to try to talk about, that's the take that I'm going to give you today, is like, what are the motivations in terms of justifying an investment in building your own open science platform? And number one is retaining control of how you structure your editorial program. At Frontiers, we start with very large, all our journals are linked together to cover interdisciplinary content. Each journal has a field. It's divided into specialty sections. You can look at our website and see how things are organized. But this gives us a very powerful organizational matrix in order to be able to move forward and define how we can take our open access offer into new fields. Now, the reason this works at Frontiers, now we roll out a new version of our platform roughly every 2 weeks. We have about 300 employees now for Frontiers. Roughly 2/3 of them are in product development and IT. Frontiers is basically an IT company that has applied is looking for solutions specifically in the context of scientific publishing. And we have really dedicated extreme resources to solving problems like connecting people to content, semantic searching, text and data mining. This is also why we're a natural partner in the Open Minted project and other European efforts. We feel that providing content in an open way, having access is one part of the problem, but we also have a responsibility to provide all that content in a form which everybody feels comfortable with in terms of being able to pull out the maximum amount of information and insight. Yeah, and again, I talked a little bit about retaining control of how the program is structured. We've recently launched a program called Open Science for Sustainability, and based largely on the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. What we found is that doing an audit of our editorial program, we find we have pretty good coverage of most of the goals, but this also allows us to expand in a very controlled way and to make sure that within 5 years from now, we'll have a publication channel for every single one of those goals. So this is something that allows us to build a sort of transversal editorial structure which cuts across all of the journals in a traditional way and provides a new way of organizing the content. Again, I talked a little bit about collaboration. The adversarial review process is something I think that most people realized was wasting a lot of time and effort. And from the very beginning, we wanted to make, one of the core goals of Frontiers from day one was to improve the review process. And this is also why we had to invest in building a platform, because there was nothing out there that would handle the review process the way that we wanted to do it. Now, this is a view of our interactive review forum. When the review process starts, this is more or less the view that people have. The one point, if you look at the bottom of the screen, you see that there are little cards of proposed reviewers. Again, this is the type of semantics that we use to solve a very concrete problem: how to connect people, the right reviewers, to the right content. And this also is a view. I won't go into too much. I can give you more detail later if anybody's interested. But what I'd like to point out here is that Frontiers, from day one, had an interactive review forum. Whether or not you consider this to be open review or not is almost a question of debate, a question of definition. But from day one, we had a forum in real time in which the editors, the reviewers, and the authors could all interact with each other to come to a consensus about whether the article is ready to be published or not. The reviewers and the editors of Frontiers, their names are revealed on every single paper. You will see that in a minute. If the paper is accepted for publication. This is something that provides a very objective threshold to the reviewers and the editors as they're interacting with the authors and making their editorial decision. A reviewer typically will say, look, if I'm going to publicly endorse your article as a sound addition to the corpus of the scientific literature, I need to see the following three things if my profile is going to be linked to your paper. And so this allows a very a collaborative and constructive discussion between the various people involved in the process. Again, transparency is very much a key word. And the way that we put this transparency into action is by having profiles everywhere at Frontiers. You go into a Frontiers environment, if there's a person involved, you will see a link to that person's profile. So if you know exactly who the key people are in that context. For example, here we see, for example, an article. We see a landing page of one of our journals. We have links to the articles from the editorial board members, from the reviewers, from the authors. Everything is linked back to a Loop profile. And this is something that is immensely useful in terms of seeing who has been involved in the validation and the editorial leadership of the various projects. Impact metrics. Frontiers was the first publisher to provide journal-level metrics back in 2008. It was initially just very simply views and downloads. Since then, we've gone on to do things a little bit more creative. Right now, for example, to give an example of one of our research topic projects, we show how the views and downloads can be viewed. We even give some demographics of the people that have been involved in downloading the article. And I think now what we see and this number needs to be updated, but if we could step back and even take a more aggregate view of things, we can see how our content is being viewed around the world. And so some very interesting observations that come out of this kind of data. You can see that, for example, in innovation hubs, there is very high usage of content from open access publishers. You can start asking yourself questions like, is the playing field level between Eastern Europe, Western Europe, between South America? How are people in South Africa? How are they interacting with the content, et cetera? I've even just taken quickly a view. If you look very granularly, we can even start to see how people locally are consuming content. For example, if you take a subset of articles, Horizon 2020 funded articles published through Frontiers, how are these articles being downloaded in very specific contexts? Right, and so community is also a very big word, a very important concept for us at Frontiers. We have, again, we launched Frontiers to solve the big problem. The big problem being we have to have a scalable solution to this, to the problem of solving large numbers of scientific articles. In order to get the job done, of course, you have to have large editorial boards. We currently have over 75,000 scientists signed on to our editorial boards across the 60 or so titles that we publish. One of our field journals will typically have between 3,000 and 5,000 editors on the editorial board, organized in a hierarchy all the way down to review editors. From the beginning, there are two things that Frontiers has done in terms of reviewer recognition, which has in the meantime become really quite a strong concept. From day one, reviewers were already recognized as being the reviewer of certain articles published on that page. It's already a very important step in terms of recognizing the work that reviewers do. And the other thing that we've done is we recognize the regular reviewers. They're named to the editorial boards as review editors. So they're editorial board members. And so these are two very important ways to recognize the role of reviewers that we've been doing for 10 years already. So how do you keep a community of 75,000 people? How do you maintain a sense that they're plugged into a bigger picture? A very important tool is what we call our digital editorial office. This is a tool that allows the editors to work together in a real-time interactive way, in a responsive environment. It provides their tasks. It provides how their co-editors are interacting with the same content, preventing people from tripping over each other. It's a very sophisticated tool. Again, we roll out a new version of this about every 2 weeks. It's in a fully responsive environment because we have a lot of people that work in clinical environments that actually during the day don't even have access to a computer, so they're actually able to look at all their tasks. They can, for example, every morning just flip through the articles that have been submitted that day to check the title, the abstracts, the people that have been selected as the handling editor, the reviewers, et cetera. So it's a very powerful way of maintaining oversight and also keeping all the people involved in the Frontiers communities around the world engaged. And quality, of course, is a very, very big, a very important concept. If we were going to solve this problem, we have to scale up, but we can only have quality at scale. We cannot have a solution that does not prevent substandard content from being published. I won't go over all of these, but having your own platform allows you very powerfully to program in modules that protect basically what it mostly does. It makes the jobs for the editorial boards as easy as possible in terms of making sure that very basic checks are done in ways that are integrated directly into the platform. Just to give just one example of is the authenticate. We do an automated authenticate check. It's programmed into our platform for every single paper that comes to Frontiers, and Frontiers is a member of the check advisory group at Crossref. And service, I think, is also a very big word. What we do, if you look at, for example, you know, we all know that it's very important. Part of providing a service is providing a rapid, collaborative, for our point of view, effective peer review, a round of peer review. At Frontiers, you see here, this is for a certain number of articles, this is a little bit a histogram in terms of the time it took to get to an editorial decision. And you can see that it's actually really quite effective. It's more or less what you'd expect to see. You have an early peak of very rapid decisions, and then you have a distribution. You have a long tail of complicated papers, but mostly within 3 months, we're giving people a very effective round of collaborative peer review. And the people that work with our system are actually quite happy. We have 11,000 people last year that I think it was a 3-year. I don't know what the time frame was, but 11,000 people replied to the survey, and the rates of satisfaction were very high among authors, among editors, and among reviewers. They felt very strongly that our approach to peer review made a significant contribution to the improvement of the quality of their contribution. And just one word about data compliance. I think Frontiers were also extremely concerned about getting data correct. I think personally that this is really, you know, as we've seen with Michael's presentation, it's really sort of funder-driven. But we have to be ready to be able to publish in a way that satisfies any funder's requirement in terms of data compliance. I saw that the Fig shares here today. I can actually see their stand from here. So I put this slide in at the last minute. We're actually right now putting the final touches on a Figshare implementation. I think this is one way. This is one step up from the way that we were doing it previously. But to look towards the future, what we're really excited about is the arrival of the European Open Science Cloud, and that for us is going to be, I think, a way of resolving a lot of the questions around data. If we get this right, working together with the European Data Cloud, then I think that this will be a very important step forward for the entire way that not only data, but also that the actual scientific literature is published. Now, I heard this, Tony told me this morning that I would have a few extra minutes, and so I'm kind of forcing something in here. It's not really but at Frontiers, most of you may have heard about our Frontiers for Young Minds, but I think it does fit into the platform picture. Frontiers for Young Minds is our journal for kids. We work together, like everything at Frontiers, it's a very collaborative effort. I also mentioned here, if there are other publishers in the room that would like to become partners, we have a growing list of publishers that are partners with the Frontiers for Young Minds. Frontiers for Young Minds is a journal fully plugged into our platform. So that's the story here, is that we decided to move forward and do something very innovative, a scientific journal for kids. We have all of the flexibility of doing that because we control the process. So we have an editorial board, as we do for all the other journals. Just for those who don't know, the way for Frontiers for Young Minds works is that articles are flagged, current articles that from a partner journal, and through one mechanism or another, the article is brought to our attention. We contact the author and say, would you think about rewriting your article so that a 12-year-old can understand? If the author, if he or she agrees, then we have an external editorial board of 12-year-olds that carry out the peer review. So we have a series of mentors. We have networks at Berkeley, Princeton. We have here in Europe. We're very excited. I don't know whether it's the next slide or not. Well, these are the different subject areas we publish in. We're very excited because we just got a very significant grant from the Drahi Foundation to actually do the entire process in Hebrew in Israel. So so this is so we have a recommendation portal that our partners can where they can point out the article. So this is all just completely plugged into our platform, and And this is I think, is really exciting. So now we're actually going to be doing foreign language publishing. That we have projects now in Spanish and Portuguese, Hebrew, and French. And there's a very rapid growing interest around the world to have this content available, and not only have the content available, but have the review process available for kids in their mother languages. So voila, that was my last slide.
So, thank you, Fred. Any questions?
Hey, thanks for that really interesting talk. So I've got two questions. One of them came in from Twitter. The first one was, to what extent does Nature Publishing Group still have a controlling interest in the Frontiers platform? And the second one is, around reviewer identification, there's a lot of concern from early career researchers and others from marginalized communities feeling that they'll get basically a fear of backlash from having exclusively open and identified peer reviews. Have you found that to be the case? Has there ever been like a repercussion for a junior author or a marginalized demographic for getting negative feedback for a review? And if so, how have you managed to deal with this?
Okay. In terms of the first question, again, I'm not a member of the board, but the Holtzbrinck Group, the Holtzbrinck Group has a minority investment in Frontiers, so that's the connection. Holtzbrinck Group being the majority owner of Macmillan, which owns Nature Publishing Group, et cetera, Nature Springer now. So voila. So there was an investment that was announced in March 2013. That hasn't. It's a non-strategic investment, so they're a minority shareholder in Frontiers. You know, in the world of scientific publishing, situations change. So, and the second question, in terms of repercussions, no, I haven't heard any particular stories about people feeling as though they're being penalized or threatened, but that said, we are very, I didn't show the slides, but we're very careful about conflicts of interest. Now, most publishers, you know, I worked at Elsevier in the 90s. I know how the traditional subscription system works. You have a paper that's accepted. You're taking the word of the publisher that paper actually went through peer review. It often happens that you know, just as you have desk rejections in publishing, you had desk acceptances where the editor-in-chief on his own or her own reputation decides that certain papers did not need even to go to peer review. And these are types of things that it's totally opaque. We know that at the end of the process, we're going to have a paper that's published with the names of the reviewers and the handling editor in the metadata on the top of the front page. We have to be extremely careful. For every single step of the way, we ask people, are you sure that there's no conflict of interest, apparent or real? If we have one of them, we have for example, an institutional database that is extremely complete, so that we're actually able to see immediately whether or not, in terms of people's profiles, whether there's a potential conflict of interest because they've been recently in the same institution. If that's the case, then immediately there's a menu, a pop-up that says, our institutional database suggests that there might be a conflict of interest. Please point out, confirm that there is or there isn't. We have had to address this conflict of interest situation at a level of detail that no other publisher has had to deal with because of this our commitment to transparency.
Thank you. Any more questions? Maybe I could just ask one quickly. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. So you call yourself a technology company, and I'm wondering how the benefits of and non-benefits of open source have been addressed at Frontiers. Are any of your solutions open source? Can we build on them? Can the community govern them? What's your response to that?
Yeah, no, I would say that with the platform itself, it would be very difficult to make that open source. We have large teams working on it continually. It's really quite a sophisticated environment. On the other hand, we would be very much open in terms of providing APIs for things like integrating the loop profiles. I talked about the profiles. If there's an institution that'd like to have loop profiles, or an organization for all their members in different types of environments, be more than happy to provide APIs that allow people to integrate those types of solutions into their environment.
Okay, thank you. In the spirit of conversation, I wonder if I can push back a bit there and say, actually, okay, it might be a massive beast of a code base, but the value of open source is not necessarily just integrating, but about allowing the code quality to be inspected, and allowing others to feed back in and build on what the products are and really make them user-driven. And if you're just going to offer APIs for integrations, then what you're doing is you're locking down that input to just the people who work for Frontiers. And I'd push back and say, actually, it would be worth a worthy investment to make that an entirely open source project to allow that inspection and growth.
Well, I mean, perhaps that's the case. I mean, I'm not. What I would say is that the processes, the machine itself I have been involved in open source projects. I've been involved in proprietary IT projects. Well, I do not see here, and I don't think it would really be, we wouldn't be really making a contribution by having this as an open project. I think it's more important to put the emphasis on the fact that the outputs that we provide, the publications themselves, are always in a format which is exactly how the end user needs to have that content in order to get maximum benefit from the content. There we have a very, very strong commitment. This is why we're working with Open Minted and other partners to make sure that, if someone were to come to us and say, we would like to have your entire article data set structured according to this XML standard, we would provide it. We'd set up an FTP service, and then within a few weeks, the people would be free to come and have the content. I think that that's much more important than actually being able to fiddle with the code behind the platform.
Okay, so I think,
over? Okay.
Yeah. So thanks to Fred. Another round of applause, please, and then we'll work it up.